This episode of Working in Music Sucks is brought to you by Plug and Alley's weekly recall newsletter. Get tips, tricks, updates on sales, and so much more weekly. You can find a link to sign up in the description of this episode wherever you're listening. Now, let's get to the show. Plug and Alley presents Working in Music Sucks, the show where we talk about what sucks about working in music so you don't have the same problems. I'm your host, John Maciel, and if you're a returning listener, glad to have you back. If you can do us a favor and drop a like if you're listening on YouTube, or leave a positive review on iTunes, we greatly appreciate it, as it'll help us reach more people who can benefit from this podcast. And if you're a brand new listener, we're glad to have you here. And in today's episode, my friends, I want to talk about something that I think a lot of us all wonder if we haven't done it already. There was a point in time when we were wondering, how do we do this? And that is how to quit your day job to prepare you for a full-time audio career. And with the new year, I thought it would be a great time to talk about this from my own personal experience and how I did it. And there are so many stories and other podcasts out there where people talk about it. And it's always from how do I put this in, because everyone's journey is different. And I really want to respect that. Most people that I've ever heard talk about this stuff are either people who never had a full-time job and we're just making records or working a part-time job or just kind of went into it. But no one had to plan for it exactly. Or no, they had to plan for it, but it was a different plan of attack. I was working full-time, 9-to-5 job, full career, all that stuff, and was making time for being in bands, making records, and then eventually making the shift to full-time audio. And I just want to talk about my experience on me and my friends and the best way to go about it, in my opinion, instead of just jumping into it. Because a lot of people say, you just got to pull the cord, man, and just go into it and do it. And then make it work, do whatever you got to do, hustle, get out there and grind. And it's just a different world. No, it's just not the same world. So you have to think of things a little bit differently. People are, at this time of recording, people are scared about inflation. The market's not too great. We're just in a really, really rough time, right? And thinking of the idea of going and making audio full-time career to some people is just I don't know if that's even possible. It is, but you got to plan for it, just like anything in life. And essentially, your audio career starts off as a side hustle that turns into your main gig. Now, the first thing that hardly ever comes up that always surprised me, and I don't understand why it's not a thing that anyone discusses, but it's if you are in a relationship with someone else, the first thing you need to do is have a conversation with them about, hey, I think that in the next 2 years, I want to make audio my full-time gig, and I want to start taking steps to audio actually being my full-time career. Just to bring them into the conversation and then explain to them, I don't know what that looks like yet. I don't know exactly what needs to be done. I just want you to know that I'm thinking about it, and I'm going to come back when I have a plan of action. Because anytime you're in a relationship, the other person deserves to know what you're thinking, obviously, and then what the plan is going to be. So you can't, I think, coming in with a game plan without a prior conversation is kind of bombarding the other party and not really, because they may have some concerns and things, and they may want some certain security, some certain things that are non-negotiable if they're to support you in that. And there is a thing of it's got to be 50-50, especially in your relationship, and this is going to be a committed person that you're with. And this significant other is someone I'm talking about, you're either planning, you're going to get married, settled down, domestic partnership. It's not just boyfriend, girlfriend, we've been together for 6 months or a year. This is someone who's this person is your road dog, right? This is a forever type of commitment relationship that you're in. It's not just a something that could in a year or two kind of fling out because of where you guys are going. You guys are at different colleges. I'm not trying to undermine anybody's relationship that may be like that. It's just this type of conversation that I'm describing is something for people who are in more serious committed relationships is all. And hearing them out on their concerns, things they're thinking, because you want to take note of that as you build your game plan. If you come in with just a game plan and it doesn't address any of their concerns, you're creating a riff. in the relationship right there from start. And it's going to be very difficult to get them on board for the rest of it, because now they're going to assume that you're always going to just spearhead things and not really discuss it. Like, they need to be part of your team. Like, you need their support, and you need to be supportive of them and their needs as well. So starting the conversation and letting them know that you don't have all the answers yet, but you want to start the conversation. So when you're doing your research and you're figuring it all out and how you're going to do it, that you can keep in mind what they want and need out of it. Now, from there, after you've started that and you have some of their concerns, then you need to actually build a game plan of like, okay, how much money do I need to make, like, gross, in order to have the dream lifestyle? So if you're going to make the shift from like a career to audio, you need to keep in mind, like, you're going to be responsible for your own retirement, insurance, taxes, vacation money, all those things. There's no raises, there's no bonuses. Like, you are in charge of creating those opportunities for yourself. No one else is going to do it for you. And keeping up with change in, inflation, how the bills, are property taxes in your area going up? Are you in tune with property taxes? How much do rents normally go for? Like, you need to know what the economy looks like. It's not just a go for it and figure it out, because that is a recipe for being unhappy, doing the thing you love, and then ultimately resenting it. So having an understanding, I unfortunately worked at a bank, so I was already thinking very pragmatically about things. That I'm a creative at the end of the day, and I love to create. And I can't help but that, like, those 10 years of working at a bank and schooling really sometimes like creep up on me. I'm like, okay, how do I do this in a way where I can be free and creative, but also create a sense of security in what I'm trying to create? Because I am my own business, I am my own boss. How do I do these things? And when you build a game plan, you want to ask yourself, like, is this something where you're going to work Monday through Friday for 2 years, and then eventually, like, or are you going to work weekends also with artists? What are your hours going to be like? What are certain, like, are you going to make sure that you have holidays off? Which holidays are you going to have off? Are you going to make sure to budget in like 2 weeks vacation in the summer, 2 weeks in around the holidays? You have to think of all that stuff beforehand. Just jumping into it is a recipe for disaster. And so many producers and mixers and audio engineers that I've known throughout the years burn themselves out because they don't think about this stuff before they make the plunge. They just dive right in, because unfortunately for musicians, hustle culture's mentality of just grind and get into it has taken over the mindset, and it destroys people. Once you have this written out, then you're going to have an idea of what your goals are, what your plans are, and from there you can calculate, okay, how much do you actually need to bring in for the first year, the first 24 months, and the first 36 months. And yes, it does. You might be saying, this sounds like a business plan. It is. And this should take you like a month to figure out, because you need to talk with your significant other. Hey, these are the times I want to have off or whatever. And if it's just you do need to take vacation time. You do need to make sure you take certain holidays and your birthday, and you need to reward yourself that you've created a system to where you allow yourself to have certain time off, because you're making a huge sacrifice by building your own thing, by building your own company, by building your own studio, by building your own resume, bringing in clients. You need to make sure that you're building not only a catalog of music that's going to outlive you and something you're proud of, but you're also creating a work system that you're happy to be in, and you're going to be happy to be in for the next few years as you're grinding. Because it's not going to be, I make all these rules and it's like, that's it. No, you're going to be doing this for a while. So you need to make sure you create a system where you're not burning yourself out, that you're happy and you can stay consistent and you can stay driven. From there, once you're able to calculate like your rate and all that stuff, now comes the part where most people say, oh, you should save like 3 to 6 months worth of expenses. From what my experience is with me and other producers and mixers I know, you ideally actually want to have 6 to 9 months, because there are going to be times when things are just slower. People are on tour, life happens, bands break up, forbid there's another pandemic, things of that nature. But having 6 to 9 months of cushion is more than enough to help you get back on that grind to find artists and bands to work with again. But ideally, it might sound impossible, but if you could stick it out to where you're doing like weekend bands and saving all that money, not towards gear, but saving it towards building like a 12-month cushion, I'm telling you right now, if you're able to, there's nothing like knowing that if anything bad happens in your business, like you want to have people paying you to come in, but knowing that if for whatever happens for like, let's say you have a slow 2 or 3 months, like the end of the year is usually really slow. You have a slow fall, you know that you can safely go those 3 months with ease, and you just got to recoup that money in the following year, and maybe your prices go up now because you're more in demand. But having like a 12-month little nest egg to pay your expenses and bills or anything that comes up, it is such a nice feeling of knowing that like you have 12 months of runway. And for businesses, they call it having a runway, meaning if something were to happen, they can pay their staff and employees for a certain amount of time. And typically they advise having in corporations and things of that nature about a 15 to 18 month runway is what most businesses have in their reserves, meaning they stop making money, they're good for 15 to 18 months. That's why when COVID happened and the pandemic hit, a lot of businesses, the big corporations, a lot were okay because they had runways. So they were like, yeah, we can endure this for like the next like if we need to, we can get through it for the next year and keep most of our staff. But then after that is when they would be nervous. And that's why when it took a longer time for things to open up, businesses were getting really sketched because now they're getting to the end of their runways essentially. And that's what you're building here. You want to build a 6 to 9 month runway, but ideally a 12-month is the way you go. The 3-month runway is not going to be enough. It takes more than 3 months to get a band from cold meeting to in your studio. And you have to really analyze your system. Like how long does it take you right now to get bands through the door? And how do you build those relationships so that they're consistent, they're coming back, and or how do you find new artists and then bring them in? How long does it take you from not having them to not having an artist to bringing in an artist? Sometimes it's going to be different, but you have to figure out your average booking rate during this time. So like, okay, I need at least 9 months if something were to happen to rebuild my pipeline of artists and bands that I'm working with, and or finding ways to diversify your studio's income, like doing podcasts and books, things that I talked about in another episode that I'll link in the show notes. Now, once you have, now that you're building your savings, you have your game plan, your significant others on board, here's another hack that I don't think many people think about. And the only reason I picked up on this, I think, was because of working at a bank. But I would always find out what each member or each artist did for a living. Like, what did they do for money? Were they just a full-time artist? Because if they were, then that means that like we were probably going to have, they either could pay no problem and or they would want to negotiate a deal, or 3, they would have like a backer is usually what I ran into. The other one is bands who everyone has like a different job. Now, the reason you want to know what people do for money is because you want to have a sense of how you're going to get paid, essentially. So it's always important, like, oh, so what do you do for a living? Oh, he works at Foot Locker. She works at Barnes and Noble. She works at Blockbuster. Like you just find out where people work, and you're like, okay, so a lot of these people have jobs where they're probably a little bit over minimum wage, and they're getting paid bi-weekly. And then you need to figure out, okay, so they're probably getting paid at this time every single month. The reason you want to know this stuff is you want to figure out when to book them into the studio so that you get your deposit on or around the time they're getting their paycheck, and that you are sending the files when they're done and everything when they're getting their next paycheck. So this really helps narrow in like, okay, I'm going to get paid because you understand people's pay cycles. And I know that sounds really nerdy in accounting, but knowing this is really, really, really helpful in getting paid, because if you're just going in and you're making arbitrary dates, I'm telling you, there's nothing more annoying than like the band got paid the following week, but now they have no money because they spent all their money on stuff. They're like, oh, we were going to do the deposit, but like, can we wait until next week because we all got paid, but we had like unexpected bills and groceries and a surprise vacation, or I got my girlfriend this, or I got my boyfriend that. Stuff like that always happens. So you want to make sure that you're like, I take reserves on this date and this date, and they're always pay cycle dates because it makes it so much easier. A lot of people say take the deposit as soon as possible. I'm like, well, I'd rather say you can book dates on this date when the deposit hits by this time. So I know that it's like, if I know they're getting paid on like a Friday, then what I'll say what I would have said back in the day, and what I said was, all right, so let's do it. If you want to book these dates, I won't book them on the calendar until I get a deposit between this date, which was like Monday, and this date, which was like Friday. Be like, the deposit needs to come in between these 5 days to book these dates. And if they're not in, then I'm going to give that time to whoever can't pay it. But it's like first come, first serve on the dates. And it was always on a pay cycle date. So I always knew like they were going to wake up that morning and get paid. And then someone else would have to deal with them not being able to pay them, not me. I was like, no, if you want to book it, I take bookings on this specific time frame. And it was never an issue getting payment from people because I figured that out. And that was all from my experience at the bank. So understand what people do for a living. Now, if they're older and they have more secure jobs, maybe they get paid once a month. You always want to make sure you kind of like with client artists like that, it's a lot easier to get paid whenever because they kind of budget for the month. But if people are on bi-weekly pay cycles, you really want to like know that so you can plan for how you get paid. And man, that's like a big hack. Now, another thing that's really important is understanding how to set up your like final payment, and always ensuring that when you tell an artist, okay, deposit to book your dates, you will not receive the completed like record until after I receive payment. And the reason for that is like after you send those files, sometimes it gets really difficult. I made this mistake a few times to get payment after you sent the files. People get lazy all of a sudden. But if you set it up to where it's like, all right, the record's done, I'll send you guys the waves as soon as I get the final payment. They want their record, so they're going to pay you ASAP. And you want to make sure, again, the final payment, you kind of schedule it so that it's around another pay cycle. So you're like, all right, cool, the final payment needs to be on this day. And you can be some arbitrary date too. Like you can say it's like 3 or 4 weeks out from now. You're like, but I'll deliver. And then if they need it sooner, they can be like, well, what if can we get it sooner? You'd be like, well, we can move it to this date. And as long as you get paid, you move it around, but you always keep it around a pay cycle date on the final payment so that you, again, obviously make sure you get paid. The next thing is just how to set up your business. I did another episode on that, which I will link in the description of this episode as well. But do not quit your job until you are fully booked. I mean, you Monday through Friday, whatever you decided was going to be your thing. Do not quit your job until you are fully booked for at least 6 to 9 months. And in those 6 to 9 months, you are still going to go and try to find more artists. You're still going to go find podcasts to edit. You need to, that's the thing with owning your own studios. You're never, ever done hustling. You're never, ever done bringing in people and trying to bring in business. You are your own marketer. You are your own Facebook ads, essentially. You are your own person who has to go out there and find people. And of course, word of mouth will help you. But if you want to stay consistent in business, you have to always be looking for artists and bands. There's a great book. It's a sales book, but it's called Fanatical Prospecting. And I'll put an affiliate link in the description if you want to get the audio or book version. I can't recommend this book enough. So it's meant for sales people. And I read it years ago working at the bank. Someone referred it to me. And it really helped shape my mind into everything that I do. Even when I was handling sponsorships for the last company I was with, and everything revolves around always prospecting and always filling up your pipeline, essentially, because your pipeline is the money you're going to make. You want people in your pipeline. Some audio engineers and producers always get grossed out when I talk like that because they're like, ugh, business speak, but it's like, yeah, well, your manager talks business. Like, you have to think this way, unfortunately, but that you need money to fuel the mission. It's as simple as that. Anyways, this book goes over principles on like how to think about prospecting, and it is for sales individuals, but you can take many of the principles that are being taught in this book and finesse them into a way to do it in a relationship way with audio. But it always comes down to, you always have to be prospecting. You always have to be looking for new artists, new bands to work with. That is not anything that's ever going to go away and stop just because you open up your studio. You have to be the one that's always finding your business to fuel and keeping up with your artists and your bands after they leave the studio, seeing how they're doing, just keeping that rapport going, keeping up on them with them on social media. That can never stop, because the moment you stop, then the business will eventually slow down and die after a couple of months, because you weren't putting any fuel in the engine. So now the engine's out of fuel and you're stuck. So just keep that in mind before you quit. Don't just quit on a whim. You just want to know that you have at least 6 to 9 months of work fully booked out, and that you're able to continually prospect and keep artists and bands coming in even after you've fulfilled all that time. So hopefully you found this episode helpful. This is some stuff I wish I would have known. Like at my second attempt at making audio full time worked, because the first time I attempted, it did not work because I didn't think of stuff like this. So hopefully this gave you a new light into how to think about making audio a full-time career. And if you're already doing it, maybe there are some things in this episode I talked about that'll help you. Either way, if you found any value in this episode, I really appreciate it if you would share it with a friend. And if you want to continue this conversation, there will be a link to the Plugin Alley Discord server in the description wherever you're listening. Until next time, remember, working in music sucks, but with what we talked about in this episode, doesn't have to. Until next time, friends.